Hello, welcome back to Average Arcader. I'm Chuck, and it's time for another episode of Cost to the Boss, where we count down the enemies we take down in our favorite video games, then calculate how much it would have cost the boss character to pay all those enemies that we take down. The very first game we covered was Streets of Rage, but today we're going to cover the sequel to that and my favorite game of that series, Streets of Rage 2. To tell you the truth, Streets of Rage is one of my all-time favorite games. Everything from the music to how your character handles is awesome and I love it. But just like many games of the time, it stretches the game logic just a little bit too far at times. What do I mean? Well, the game expects me to believe that a young teenager by himself can take on a whole entire gang of hardened criminals with just his fists and some skates. I mean, I don't know what those skates are made out of, but I know I want a pair. Anyway, why don't we get started on the game? In this game, we have our choice of 4 different characters: Max, Axel, Blaze, and Skate. For this playthrough, we're gonna pick Axel. As we start up the first stage, we're reintroduced to some enemies from the first game. Annoying Gangster Guy and Annoying Mohawk Guy. And yes, I'm still going to use those nicknames because that's what I called them, even in this game when I first played them as a kid. We're also introduced to a new common enemy for the game, Black Guy. Yes, that's what I called him. I was a very simple kid, okay? I didn't come up with complex things. So, levels are broken down a little bit differently in Streets of Rage 2 than they are in the first Streets of Rage. Now, almost every single level has you fight multiple sub-bosses before you get to the main boss at the end. In Stage 1, we have 2 sub-bosses that we have to fight. The first one being Knife Guy. Now, Knife Guy isn't too dangerous, not by himself. He has a very slow main attack, but if we are in a situation where we're surrounded by a bunch of enemies, he can be dangerous as we are distracted by the other enemies. Our next sub-boss is another familiar face. It's Whip Lady, but now she has an electrified whip. But just like Knife Guy, she's not too dangerous by herself. But with more enemies on the screen, she can be dangerous. But after we defeat Whip Lady, we move on to the final boss of the level. Bartender Guy, who for a first level boss can actually put up a decent fight. It's not too hard, not too easy. But once we defeat him, that brings an end to this stage, so let's go to the takedown counter and count the takedowns. Our total number of takedowns for Stage 1 is 53, with the most takedowns being the Annoying Gangster Guy, with 23 takedowns. Let's move on to Stage 2. Stage 2 is a real fun stage, mainly because it introduces a new common enemy for the game, Biker Guy. Biker Guy is really fun to fight, because most of the time when you fight them, they're driving around in these dirt bikes, which is not too hard to take down. One well-timed punch or kick will instantly take them down and knock them off the bike. So all in all, a real fun common enemy to fight. The sub-boss for this stage is a character that younger Chuck liked to call Samurai Guy. Now, Samurai Guy may look intimidating, but he's really not. In fact, he's only barely stronger than a common enemy. He has some powerful attacks, but they're just so slow that they aren't really that much of a threat. Even when there's multiple of him at once, he's still not that challenging. After we defeat him, we move on to the final boss of this stage, Jetpack Guy. Now, to tell you the truth, Jetpack Guy should have been the very first boss in the game, because he is super easy. Way easier than Bartender Guy. All you have to do is wait for him to get low enough and then just jump kick him. Keep doing that and he'll go down. So all in all, a really easy boss. So now that we reached the end of stage 2, let's head to the takedown counter and see how many takedowns we had. Our total takedowns for stage 2 is 46, with Annoying Gangster Guy just beating out Biker Guy with 16 takedowns. Let's see how stage 3 goes. In stage 3, the game starts to have us fight more sub-bosses. We fight 6 sub-bosses in this stage before we get to the final boss. The first one being a samurai guy, not too hard, but right after him, we're introduced to this game's version of Ninja Guy, who actually looks like an actual ninja in this game. Ninja Guy can be a difficult fight. He moves quickly, and most of the time that you fight him, he spawns with a very powerful weapon. But if you move quickly, you can take him down. After that, we fight a whip lady and knife guy, one more ninja guy, and then the final boss, Monkey Guy. And it turns out that this is the claw guy enemy from the first game, only he's been upgraded, because why not? He was already ridiculous before, why not make him even more ridiculous? Anyway, after we defeat him, we end this stage. Let's go to the takedown counter and see takedowns. So our total takedowns for stage 3 is 59, with Annoying Gangster Guy having the most takedowns again, with 23 takedowns. Let's move on to stage 4. In stage 4, we're reintroduced to 2 characters from the first game. The first one being Big Fat Guy, only in this game, he's been demoted. He's now just a sub-boss, and he's super easy. The second character that we're reintroduced to is Big Wrestling Guy, who happens to be the main boss of this stage. He's pretty much the same, although he is a little harder since now he can break our attacks if we're not quick enough. But if you know what you're doing, he's still not that hard of a fight. Let's head to the takedown counter so that we can move on to stage 5. In stage 4, we had 75 takedowns, with Black Guy taking the lead with the most takedowns for this stage at 32 takedowns. Let's move on to stage 5. So stage 5 introduces us to another new sub-boss. And you know, I cannot remember what I called him as a kid, so let's just call him Kickbox Guy. Now, Kickbox Guy is not the only sub-boss we have for this stage. In fact, we fight a total of 9 altogether, which wouldn't be bad if we didn't have to fight this guy as a main boss. I have no nickname for this guy. When I think about when I first played this as a kid, all that comes to mind is blind rage, followed by uncontrollable crying. Then everything goes blank. I don't think I liked this character very much as a kid. Anyway, after we survive him, we can move on to the next stage. We have a total of 59 takedowns for this stage, with Annoying Gangster Guy once again having the most takedowns. But let's see what type of numbers we get in the next stage. Stage 6 has you fighting mostly sub-bosses, with a double boss battle at the end of the stage with Monkey Guy and Jetpack Guy. Now, all you really need to do is just focus on Monkey Guy, because as soon as he goes down, Jetpack Guy instantly goes down with him. So, not really that big of a challenge. Let's move on to the next stage. Only 42 takedowns for stage 6, with Biker Guy having the most takedowns with 14 takedowns. Let's see how stage 7 does. Stage 7 is almost identical to stage 6, having you fight mostly sub-bosses with a double boss battle at the end. Only this time, you fight 2 robots. And fighting these guys is hilarious. Mainly because when they actually land a hit on you, it sounds so funny. With them out of the way, we can finally move on to our last stage of the game. Stage 7 has a total of 55 takedowns, with Black Guy just beating Annoying Gangster Guy with 14 takedowns. Also, this stage has the most sub-bosses. With 16 sub-bosses, it has more than even Stage 8. For most of Stage 8, you're on this elevator here. As we go up level by level, we fight 5 different sub-bosses until we get to the top and we're reintroduced to Mr. X. But wait a minute. Is he wearing the same suit that he was wearing in the first game? He is! Come on, man. We've already established that you're a millionaire. I think you can afford another suit. Anyway, before we fight Mr. X, we have to first fight who I assumed, or I've always assumed, is his second in command? Guy in Black. Depending on your character and how well you know how to use that character, Guy in Black can be a difficult fight. But once you defeat him, you can finally fight Mr. X again, whose fight is almost identical to the one in the first one. He just gets up, starts firing his gun as minions come in. He's actually pretty easy to take down. With Mr. X defeated, let's look at our total takedowns for the entire game. So our total takedowns for Streets of Rage 2 is 422, with Annoying Gangster Guy having the most takedowns with 144 takedowns. So now that we have all our takedowns accounted for, let's count the cost. So now that we have an accurate count of the takedowns, we can figure out what the cost is. Now, just like the first Streets of Rage game, there's not that much lore because this is an old Sega Genesis game. But that's okay, because we can use the same formula that we used in the first game to calculate the costs. So if we use the same reference that we used in the first game, we can split Mr. X's organization into 3 different groups. Soldier, which is made up of all the common enemies like Annoying Gangster Guy and Annoying Mohawk Guy. Mercenary, which is most of the sub-bosses like Whip Lady and Knife Guy. And then Territory Boss, which is all the stage bosses of the game. Now if we look at the bottom, we can see a total of each one's pay. But before we do a grand total, we need to first account for 2 categories that weren't in the first game. Guy in Black and the robots. You see, the game presents Guy in Black as Mr. X's right-hand man. That means he would be making way more than anybody else in the organization. A safe estimate would be somewhere around $70,000 a week. But what about the robots? Real-world robots that even come close to the ones we fight in the game cost around $2 million each. We fight 3 of them, so that's $6 million. But we're not going to add that to the weekly cost. No, we're going to add that to the yearly cost. What we're going to add to the weekly cost is the $400,000 worth of maintenance that he would need to pay for the robots. So that puts our total cost at $2,039,000 a week. That's over $8 million a month and over $103 million a year after we add for the robots. To tell you the truth, I'm really surprised by the numbers. Growing up, I always thought Streets of Rage 2 was a bigger game than Streets of Rage 1. I guess I just enjoyed it more. But that puts an end to this episode. Next episode, I'll tackle the last game in this series, Streets of Rage 3. But until then, I'm Chuck, this is Average Arcader. Have a nice day.